Hey everyone, if you enjoy my park ranger horror stories, I've started uploading them on Spotify too. My YouTube channel got demonetized, so I'm putting a lot more focus into Spotify now. You'll find daily scary stories there with longer, darker, and more immersive horror content. If you want to support the channel, please go follow the Spotify page and leave a 5-star rating. It genuinely helps me keep making these stories. The Spotify link is in the description and pinned comment. Turn off the lights. Put on your headphones and I'll see you there. Want to start with something? Before I tell you anything about the trail, about the forest, about what I saw in that clearing, I want you to look at me and tell me if I seem crazy to you. Go ahead. Look, no, I didn't think so. I'm Dale Mossner. I worked for the National Park Service for 30 years. 30 years of backcountry patrols, rescue operations, missing persons searches. I've pulled bodies out of rivers. I've carried injured hikers on my back for 6 miles in the dark. I've been charged by a bear struck by lightning. Once left arm, 1989, still have the scar. And I have never, not once in 3 decades, filed a report I wasn't 100% sure about. I filed one report I wasn't sure about, just one, this one, and then I retired. Because some things, once you've seen them, you can't unsee them. And some places, once they've found you, they don't really let you go. Note, throughout the interview, Dale keeps his hands resting on the table. About 12 minutes in, he moves the small potted plant, a fern, left on the table by the homeowner, closer to himself. He doesn't seem to notice he's doing it. His fingers rest in the soil for the remainder of the interview. It started in the summer of 1997, June through August. 5 hikers, 5 separate groups, none of them knew each other. They came from different states, Oregon, California, one couple from Ohio who had never been to the Pacific Northwest before in their lives. All of them entered the Hoh Rainforest Corridor on different days, different weather, different trail access points. All 5 came back describing the same trail. Now, let me explain something to you about the Hoh Corridor, because you need to understand this to understand why that was so strange. The Hoh Rainforest is one of the largest temperate rainforests in the entire country. It gets over 12 feet of rain a year. The trees there, some of them have been standing since before Columbus sailed. The moss grows so thick on everything that it swallows sound. You can stand 10 feet from someone in that forest and not hear them moving. It is dense, it is ancient, and it is extremely well mapped. We knew every trail, every spur, every unofficial path that hikers had worn into the ground over decades. This trail was not on any map. All 5 hikers described the same 3 things. First, a cedar tree split at the base, its 2 halves curved outward like an open hand reaching up from the ground. Second, a stream small, no more than 2 feet across, that ran uphill, not steeply, just gently, quietly, moving the wrong direction for about 40 feet before it disappeared under the roots. Third, a clearing, a perfect circle in the trees where the rain did not reach the ground. They all said the same thing about it. The rain just stopped in the air above it, like a ceiling made of water. I interviewed all 5 of them myself. The first thing that hit me was their faces. Every single one of them, calm. Not the kind of calm you get after a good hike, deeper than that. Like they had been given something. Like something heavy they had been carrying for years had just been quietly lifted off them while they walked. I asked them if they were scared on the trail. None of them were. That bothered me more than anything else. I asked them if they wanted to go back. Every single one said yes, immediately, without thinking about it. 2 of them tried. They drove back to the park within 2 weeks of their original visit. Quit their jobs first. One of them, a teacher from Sacramento, just didn't show up one Monday. Left a note for his wife that just said, "I need to go back." The other one, a woman from Portland, early 30s, 2 kids, told her husband she was going grocery shopping. Her car was found at the Hoh trailhead 3 days later. Neither of them was ever found. My supervisor told me people get disoriented in the Hoh. Said the moss, the mist. The way sound doesn't travel right in there. It messes with people's sense of direction. They probably walked the same trail twice and convinced themselves it was new. The stream, probably an optical illusion on a slope. The rain in the clearing, some kind of canopy effect. I nodded and said, "Yes, sir." And then I went home and spread all 5 reports on my kitchen table and read them back to back until 2 in the morning. Because they didn't just describe the same things. They used the same words. People who had never met each other, from different states, different ages, different backgrounds. They all said, like an open hand. They all said the stream looked like it was being pulled. They all described the clearing as the quietest place I have ever been. Word for word. That is not a coincidence. That is something else entirely. I put in for a solo backcountry assignment, 72 hours. I told my supervisor I wanted to do a thorough trail documentation sweep of the north section of the Ho corridor. He approved it without blinking. I had done it 100 times before. I packed GPS radio, 3 days of food, extra batteries, bear spray, my field notebook, which I had carried on every patrol for 15 years. And, if I'm being honest with you, a flask. Don't put that in your documentary. Day one was nothing. And I mean that in a good way. The forest was just itself, the way it always was. That deep, dark, breathing green that you either love or you hate, and I had always loved it. The mist sat low in the trees. A Roosevelt elk crossed my path about an hour in, and we looked at each other for a long moment before she walked on. I followed my GPS, documented everything, found nothing unusual. Camped that night by a small creek, ate my food, slept well. Day 2 was different. I noticed the moss first. I had been in that forest for 20+ years, and I knew what moss looked like. It grows on everything, the trees, the rocks, the fallen logs. It grows in every direction, no pattern, just thick green chaos covering everything it can find. That's how moss works. Not here, not in this section. Here the moss was growing in shapes, segons. Perfect 6-sided cells like a honeycomb, covering the bark of every tree within a 100-yard stretch. I knelt down and looked at it up close. The borders between each hexagon were razor clean. I took photographs. I told myself it was some kind of unusual growth pattern. Maybe the light came through the canopy at a specific angle. Maybe it was a disease. I kept moving. That night, and this is the part I have never put in any official report, I heard it breathe. I was in my sleeping bag. It was around 2 in the morning, and the forest was doing what the Ho does at night, which is get so quiet it almost has a sound of its own. A low hum, like the whole place is one giant living thing just barely keeping still. And then, from below me, from beneath the ground, I heard it. A breath. One long, slow inhale that I felt more than heard. The ground under my sleeping bag got warmer. Not hot, just warm. The way a dog feels warm when it curls up against you. I sat up, I put my hand flat on the ground. It was warm. The soil was actually warm. I sat there for a long time with my hand on the ground, and I thought about a lot of things. I thought about the 5 reports on my kitchen table. I thought about the missing teacher and the missing woman with 2 kids. I thought about getting up, packing my gear, and walking out of there in the dark. I did not get up. I told myself I was staying because it was my job, because those 2 people were still missing, because somebody needed to find out what was happening in this section of the park. But that wasn't entirely true. The other part of the truth was that the warmth felt good. It felt like something I hadn't felt in a long time. Like the ground was just glad I was there. I picked up my radio. Signal was clean. I called base, gave my location, said everything was normal. I didn't mention the breathing. On the morning of day 3, I woke up and the trail was just there. I don't know how else to say it. I had been in that area for 2 days, and there was no path. Just dense undergrowth, ferns, fallen logs, the usual tangle of a forest that does not want you to walk through it easily. And then I woke up, and 20 feet from where I had slept, the undergrowth had parted, cleanly, like curtains being pulled back from a window. A clear path, soft bare earth leading into the trees. It wasn't there the night before. I stood and looked at it for a long time. Then I picked up my radio. No signal. Dead. I checked the GPS, frozen. The screen was lit up, but the position marker wasn't moving, just sitting there blinking at me like it had given up. My training was very clear about what to do when your navigation and communication equipment both fail at the same time in backcountry terrain. You stop moving forward. You sit tight, you try to restore equipment function, and if you can't, you navigate by landmarks back to a known trail. I want you to know that I am aware of that. I took 1 step onto the trail, and I need you to understand what that 1 step felt like. Because this is the part that I think about every day. And this is the part that I think people need to hear if they're ever going to understand what happened. It felt like relief, not the small kind, not the kind where you sit down after a long walk, the deep kind. The kind you feel when you've been holding your breath for months, and someone finally tells you it's okay to breathe. Every muscle in my body just let go. My shoulders dropped, my jaw unclenched. I hadn't even realized how tightly I had been holding everything until that 1 step. And then all of it just left. I kept walking. The trail was beautiful. Everything in the Ho is beautiful, but this was different. The light came through the canopy at a perfect angle, this soft, golden green light that turned everything it touched into something out of a painting. The air tasted clean in a way that city people talk about, but never quite capture. Every step on the soft earth felt like it had been placed there just for me. And then I found the cedar, exactly like they described it. Split at the base, its two great halves curved outward, reaching up and away from each other, the exact shape of two hands opening. I stood in front of it and put my own hand on the bark, and it was warm. Not like wood that has been sitting in sunlight. Warm like skin. I kept walking. I found the stream. And let me tell you something. I have been a scientist about nature my whole career. I believe in geology and hydrology, and I can explain almost anything I have ever seen in the natural world. But I knelt beside that stream and I watched that water move, and it was moving uphill, not fast. Just slowly, quietly, with complete confidence, running uphill for 40 feet before sliding under the roots at the far end. I put a leaf in it and watched the leaf travel uphill. I watched it with my own eyes. I knew I should turn back. I knew it the same way you know you've had one too many drinks. Clearly, logically, in the part of your brain that is still running the calculations. Turn back, Dale. Equipment failure, unknown terrain, protocol. But there was another part, a part I had been pushing down for 30 years. The part that had watched his wife pack her bags in 1991 while he sat at the kitchen table and couldn't make himself ask her to stay, because some piece of him had always known she was right, that he loved the silence more than he had ever loved her. The part that had spent 30 years sitting alone in ranger stations at 2 in the morning, listening to the forest breathe, and feeling underneath the loneliness, something that was almost like peace. That part of me didn't want to turn back. That part of me had been walking toward this trail for a long time. The trail ended at a clearing. A perfect circle, maybe 60 feet across, ringed by trees so tall their tops disappeared into the mist. And above the clearing, I am telling you exactly what I saw. The rain was hanging in the air, not falling, not stopped in some trick of the wind, just suspended. Thousands of tiny drops sitting completely still at a height of about 20 feet, like someone had pressed pause on the sky. I reached up and put my hand into the bottom edge of it. The drops were cold on my fingers, real. Not an illusion, not a trick of the light. I pulled my hand back and it was wet. I stood there with my wet hand in the dry clearing, and I looked up at a ceiling of frozen rain, and I felt the most peaceful I had felt since I was a child. Then I saw them. Two figures standing at the far edge of the clearing, still. Perfectly, completely still, the way animals go still when they feel safe. Not frozen, not afraid, just settled. I recognized them from the missing persons files I had memorized. The teacher from Sacramento and the woman from Portland. They had been missing for 3 months. They were barefoot. Their clothes were worn thin and dirty. They were too lean. I could see that from 30 feet away. But they were standing without any difficulty, and they were both smiling. Not a frightened smile, not a confused smile, just happy. The way people smile in old photographs when they don't know the camera is there. I called out to them. I used their names. The woman turned first. She said Dale. Just that. Just my name. I had never met her. She had no way of knowing my name. I crossed the clearing. I asked them if they were hurt. I asked them if they knew where they were, what month it was, whether they could walk. I was going through the protocol for disoriented individuals, asking all the right questions in the right order, because it was the only thing I could do that felt remotely normal in a situation that had completely left normal behind. The teacher looked at me the way a person looks at someone who is asking the wrong questions. He said, "You're not really here about us, Dale." I asked him what he meant. He said, "It's been watching you for years. Every time you came into this section, every overnight, every time you sat outside your station in the dark and wished everything would just go quiet." He paused. "It heard you, all of it." I told him he didn't know what he was talking about. The woman said, "It doesn't want to hurt you. It's just been alone for a very long time, longer than you can imagine, and it is very good at knowing which people feel the same way." I looked at her. I looked at him. I looked at the rain hanging above us, perfectly still, and I felt it. The pull, coming up through the soles of my boots, through the earth, through whatever was beneath the earth. I felt it the same way you feel music in your chest at a concert. A warmth, a pulling warmth. Like something enormous and patient and very, very old was reaching up from somewhere deep and saying simply, "Stay." I want to be honest with you. I stood there in that clearing for a long time. I thought about my empty house in Port Angeles. I thought about the silence of my station at 2 in the morning. The good silence and the bad silence. The way they feel exactly the same until you're too far in to tell the difference. I thought about 30 years of walking into the wilderness because people weren't enough. And coming back because the wilderness wasn't quite enough either. I thought, what if this was the thing that was enough? The teacher looked at me and said, very quietly, "You can stay, Dale. Nobody's waiting for you." That was the cruelest thing anyone has ever said to me. Because it was true. I want to tell you about something I noticed just before I turned around, my boot prints. The trail was soft earth, and I could see my prints clearly. Every step I had taken from the cedar to the stream to the clearing, each one pressed cleanly into the ground. Normal, but when I looked closer, when I really looked, I could see older prints, my prints. The same boot size, the same tread pattern, worn down in the same place on the right heel. Dozens of them, overlapping each other, going forward, some of them going back, some of them only going forward, and they were old. Some of them were weeks old. A couple of them, I am not a man who says things he can't back up. A couple of them looked like they had been there for years, pressed deep into the soil and grown half over with moss. I had been on this trail before, not consciously, but I had been here before. Every time I came into this corridor, every solo overnight when I would walk a little off trail just to feel the deep forest around me. Every time I stopped and put my hand on a tree and felt the bark and felt something underneath it, something slow and vast and breathing. I thought I was just appreciating the nature. I was being walked here, step by step, season by season, the path getting a little more worn each time. It had been building toward this for years. It chose the hikers, not because it wanted the hikers. It chose them because they would be reported missing, because I would be assigned to investigate, because I was the one it actually wanted, and it needed a reason to bring me all the way in, all the way to the clearing, all the way to the point of no return. It hadn't lured 5 hikers. It had set a trap for 1 ranger. The teacher was still watching me. The woman was still smiling that terrible, peaceful smile. I thought about how well it had read me, how accurately, how it had found the exact right spot, that hollow place in me that 30 years of silence had carved out, and offered to fill it, with peace, with belonging, with an end to the loneliness that I had made such a good life out of pretending wasn't there. I am telling you right now, the hardest thing I have ever done in 30 years in the wilderness was turn around. Not because of fear. I want to be clear about that. Because it felt like walking away from something I had always wanted. I turned around. I walked back up the trail. I passed the uphill stream. I passed the cedar. I did not look back. I walked until the trail closed behind me. And it did close. I heard it. The soft rustle of undergrowth returning to its place, like a door shutting gently. And I kept walking until I found my camp and I packed my gear, and I walked out of the Ho corridor without stopping. I filed my report. I listed what I found as unusual environmental features, investigation inconclusive. I did not mention the clearing. I did not mention the breathing. I did not mention any of it. 2 weeks later, I put in my retirement papers. My supervisor asked me why. I told him 30 years was enough. Note, this is where Dale moves the potted fern closer to himself. His right hand drops into the soil. He doesn't look at it. He keeps talking, and that's it. That's the whole story. I drove home. I filed my paperwork. I retired on a Friday in October of 1997, and I have been in this house in Port Angeles ever since, 22 years. I have not been back to the Ho corridor. I have not been back to any section of that park. I sleep fine. I really do. I keep the windows open because I like the night air, and sometimes the wind comes off the mountains and there's a smell in it. Moss and cedar and wet earth. But that is just the Pacific Northwest. That is just where I live. I am fine. He is quiet for a long moment. His fingers are deep in the soil of the fern. The fern's leaves are leaning slightly toward him. I notice this but say nothing. I just want people to know. If you ever walk a trail and every step feels too good, if the forest around you feels too quiet, too right, too much like exactly what you needed, if the ground beneath you feels warm, turn around. It doesn't want to hurt you. That's the thing I keep trying to explain to people when I tell this story. It's not evil. It's not a monster. It has been in the ground beneath that forest for longer than any human being has been alive, and it is lonely in a way that I don't think we have a word for. It just wants company. It's very patient. It is very good at finding the people who want to disappear. And if you're one of those people, if you know what I mean when I say you've been carrying something heavy for a long time, and some quiet, dark piece of you is always looking for a place to put it down, be careful in the Ho. Be very careful. End of recorded interview. Interview concluded at 4:17 p.m. Dale Mossner shook my hand at the door and thanked me for listening. His hand was cold, but his grip was steady. He seemed, as I have said, completely fine. Documentarian's footnote: Dale Mossner was reported missing on September 8, 2019, 4 days after this recording was made. His car was found at the Ho Rainforest Trailhead at 6:45 a.m. on September 9th. The engine was still warm. His keys were in the ignition. His wallet and phone were on the passenger seat. A search and rescue team entered the corridor that morning. Two rangers, both veterans with more than 15 years of experience in the park, reported finding a trail approximately 3 miles in that was not on any park map. They described it as a clear, open path through dense undergrowth. One of the rangers described the air on the trail as the freshest I've ever breathed. The other ranger said she felt, and I am quoting her field report directly, like someone had taken a weight off my chest. They were ordered to stop and return to the trailhead immediately. Both complied. The search for Dale Mossner was called off after 11 days. He is listed as a missing person. He is 66 years old. He has no living relatives. His house in Port Angeles has been empty since September 2019. The potted fern he touched during our interview I took home with me. I'm not sure why. It is sitting on my desk as I write this. It seems to be doing very well. It is leaning toward me. My name is Ellen Cortland, Ranger First Class, badge number 41 I have been with the National Park Service for 6 years. Before that, I was an Army medic for 8. I have seen things that would make most people stop sleeping. I say this not to brag. I say it so you understand that when I tell you what happened in Cabin 7C, I am not someone who scares easily. I am someone who counts things. I have done it since Kandahar. My therapist called it a grounding technique. I called it staying alive. When everything around you is loud and wrong and falling apart, you count. Steps, breaths, heartbeats, the number of boots you can see on the ground. Counting gives you a floor to stand on when the floor is gone. It makes the world make sense. It takes everything that's spinning and pins it down. I want you to remember that. Before you read the rest of this, I want you to understand that counting was the thing that kept me sane for 14 years. I did not know it could be turned against me. The assignment came in on a Tuesday, standard winter patrol. Cabin 7C in the Nyack Coal Creek backcountry, Glacier National Park, Montana. Elevation 6,400 feet, 20 miles from the nearest road. The cabin had missed 3 consecutive radio check-ins. The ranger stationed there, Ranger Dale Harwick, age 41, 8 years with the service, no prior incidents, had not responded in 5 days. The official reason for sending me alone, manpower, 3 rangers down with flu. Weather window, 2 days before the next storm front. Me, available, experienced, and the best cross-country skier in the district. The official risk assessment, low. Battery failure, iced antenna, equipment malfunction. These things happen every winter in the backcountry. Someone skis in, checks the cabin, skis out. Harwick was probably fine. Probably sitting by the stove reading a paperback, completely unaware that anyone was looking for him. My equipment checklist, filed with this report. Emergency beacon. Sleeping bag rated to 40 Fahrenheit. 3 days of food, medical kit, flares, satellite phone, backup standard radio, headlamp, fire starter, snow shovel, extra socks, 4 pairs because I have learned things the hard way, and my personal additions not on the official list, a small green notebook, a pencil, because pens freeze at 20 Fahrenheit and I have learned that too, my step counter, and the quiet constant habit in my head that never really turns off, the inventory, the count, my anchor. I departed Trailhead 14A at a 6:12 hours on December 14, 2011. Temperature, 18 Fahrenheit. Sky clear. Forecast, stable for 36 hours. Expected return, 48 hours. I remember thinking it was a beautiful morning. The kind of cold that makes the air look clean. The pines were thick with snow. Everything was quiet. I counted 47 trees in the first mile. I know because I wrote it down. I reached Cabin 7C at 16:41 hours. It took me just over 10 hours. The last 3 miles were steep, and the snow was chest-deep in the gullies. I counted my steps the entire way. When I stopped at the cabin door, my step counter read 31,406. I had also counted 844 trees on the ski-in. I wrote both numbers in my notebook. Then I stood there for a moment, breathing, watching the cabin. It looked fine. That was the first strange thing. It looked completely fine. No broken windows, no collapsed roof. Smoke had been coming from the chimney recently. I could tell by the faint smell still in the cold air. The door was latched, not locked. I pushed it open. The cabin was warm. Not just the leftover warmth of a dead fire. Warm, like someone had stoked it within the last few hours. The stove was still going. Harwick? I called nothing. I stepped inside. I did a full visual sweep, the way they teach you, the way the Army teaches you, faster and louder. Corners, shadows, ceiling, floor. Nothing. One room, 16 feet by 12 feet. Bunk bed on the north wall. Table in the center. Stove on the south wall, shelves on the east wall full of emergency supplies. Radio on the west wall, mounted LED light glowing green, functional. His gear was packed neatly on the lower bunk. Sleeping bag rolled, pack closed. His food, a week's worth, sat untouched on the shelf. His boots were by the door. His boots were by the door. If you've ever spent time in real backcountry winter conditions, you know what that means. You don't leave your boots by the door unless you're inside. You don't go outside in this terrain, in this cold, in winter, without your boots. Harwick had not left voluntarily. I turned on my radio and reported in. I kept my voice flat and calm. I said, cabin structurally sound, stove active, previous occupant absent, gear intact. I said I would assess further and check back in the morning. The dispatcher on the other end said, copy that, Cortland. Stay warm. I said I would. I did not mention the walls. I need you to understand something about what I saw. I have been in places that were violent. I have seen what fear does to people, what it makes them do, what it leaves behind. When I turned from the radio and looked, really looked, at the interior of Cabin 7C, I did not feel horror right away. I felt something quieter and colder than horror. I felt recognition. Every wall was covered in tally marks. Every inch of them. Carved into the wood with what I later determined was a pocket knife. Scratched into the glass of the two small windows with something sharp. On the ceiling, carved upward, which means he stood on the bunk to do it. On the floor, and these ones were not carved. They were drawn dark reddish-brown lines, groups of 5, thousands of them, covering every inch of the floorboards except for a small clear circle in the very center of the room, about 3 feet in diameter, like an eye. I stood in that clear circle, without thinking. Instinctively, it felt like the right place to stand. Then I did the only thing I knew how to do. I counted them. West wall, all 337. East wall, word me 1. North wall, 1,644. South wall around the stove, careful not to touch, 3102. Ceiling, I counted 6,012 before I had to stop and look away, because my neck was aching and something about staring up at that ceiling for that long made my eyes feel strange, like the marks were moving if I didn't focus directly on them. Floor, I could not get an accurate count. The marks continued under the furniture, under the bunk, under the stove. I did not move the furniture. I did not look under the bunk. I made dinner. Pasta and a freeze-dried meal pack heated on the stove. I counted the items in my pack while I waited for the water to boil. Standard inventory, my anchor, my floor. First count, 47 items. I ate. The food was fine. The stove was warm. The cabin was quiet except for the wind outside, which in the trees at that elevation sounds almost like breathing if you let yourself think about it, so I didn't let myself think about it. I counted the items in my pack again before bed. Second count, 49. I went through the pack item by item. I counted aloud, touching each thing as I named it. I got to 47 and there was nothing left to count. I did it again. 47. I sat back and looked at what I had laid out on the table. 47 items, clear as anything. And yet the moment I started counting in my head, moving my eyes from item to item, the number came back as 49. I told myself I was tired. 20 miles on skis at altitude does something to your brain. I put everything away and climbed into the upper bunk. I looked at the ceiling, at the tally marks. I told myself not to count them. I made it about 4 seconds. Then 6,013. Then 6,014. I had not moved. I had not touched the ceiling. I could see the entire ceiling from where I lay. Nothing had changed. The count had changed. I turned over, faced the wall, and closed my eyes. My last thought before I tried to sleep was, Harwick, what were you counting? I did not sleep. I want to be honest about that. I lay in the bunk for approximately 3 hours, eyes closed, and I did not sleep for a single minute. Here is what I did instead. I counted. I counted my breaths. I counted my heartbeats. I counted the seconds between gusts of wind hitting the cabin walls. I counted the number of times the stove popped and ticked as the fire settled. Counting is how I fall asleep. Has been for years. You count. The world gets small. The world gets manageable, and then it gets dark and quiet and you're under. But something was wrong with the counts. Not dramatically wrong. Not 10 fingers. Count them. You have 17 wrong. Just off, a little too high. Consistently, persistently too high. I counted my breaths per minute. 14. That's normal. Then I counted the sounds of breathing in the room. Mine. 1. The wind outside, which sometimes sounds like breathing. 1. Total 2. I counted again. Total sounds of breathing in the room. 4. I opened my eyes, sat up, looked at every corner of the room. I turned on my headlamp. I swept the beam across every inch of the cabin. Nothing. The room was exactly as I had left it. Gear on the lower bunk, table in the center, stove, radio. Walls covered in marks. Nothing else. I counted again. 3. I cannot explain this to you in a way that sounds rational, so I'm going to stop trying and just tell you what happened. I counted the items in my pack again. 47, then 51, then 48. The numbers were not consistent. They were not even close to consistent. In 30 years of counting, my counts have always matched. My counts are how I know I am okay. They are how I know where I am. And my counts do not change between one moment and the next with nothing in the room touching anything. I got out of the bunk. I stood in the clear circle on the floor, that small eye of unmarked wood in the center of the room, because it still felt like the right place to stand, and I was past asking myself why. I stood there and I looked at the west wall and I counted the tally marks, 4,337. I had counted 4,003 on the west wall when I arrived. I counted now, 4,338. One new mark. I walked to the west wall. I put my face 2 inches from it and I looked at every group of 5. I was not wrong. There were 4,338 marks. One of them was lighter than the others, fresher, the wood fibers still slightly raised. It was real. It was physical. It had not been there before. I had not made it. I had not touched the wall. I had been on the bunk. I went back to the center circle. I stood there and I thought very carefully about what a rational person does in this situation. A rational person calls it in. A rational person says, something is wrong in this cabin. I don't know what. I'm coming out. A rational person does not spend the night counting marks that multiply on their own. I picked up the radio. I held it. I put it back down, because here is the thing. Here is the part that I have a hard time writing, even now, even in this report that no one may ever read. I was scared to call it in. Not because I was embarrassed. Because I was scared that if I said the words out loud, the tally marks increased by themselves. I counted and I keep getting wrong numbers. Then whatever was making that happen would know I knew. And knowing felt dangerous, and not knowing felt worse. And I was standing in a circle of bare floorboards in the middle of a room covered in marks made by a man who was gone. And I was counting, and the numbers kept coming back wrong. I tried one more time, a full count of everything I could verify. Items in pack, 47. Trees I could remember from the ski-in, 844. Steps on my counter, 3146. Total marks visible on the west wall, 4,038. Sounds of breathing in the room, 5. I sat down in the center circle. I pulled my knees to my chest. I wrote in my notebook in very small letters, I am beginning to understand what Harwick was counting. The following is reproduced from Ranger Cortland's handwritten entry in the official cabin log, a log she was not authorized to write in. Her handwriting has been verified by a forensic documents examiner. This entry is time-stamped by the cabin's automatic log clock at 0214 hours, December 15, 2011. I'm going to write this down because if I don't write it down, I am going to scream, and I cannot scream because I don't want them to hear me. I have been counting heartbeats for the past hour. Mine, 71 per minute. I know my resting heart rate. I've known it since Army training. 71 beats per minute. That's me. That's what I feel in my own chest. But when I count the heartbeats, I can feel in this room. Not hear, feel. Through the soles of my feet, through the floorboards, through my palms when I press them flat on the wood. The total is not 71 per minute. The total is 214 per minute. 3 extra heartbeats. 3 separate rhythms, not mine. I mapped them. I walked around the room pressing my palms on the floor and I found them. One near the door, slow and heavy. One near the stove, faster, almost nervous. One directly beside the lower bunk, so close to where I sleep that I can feel it in my back when I lie down. 3 things in this room that have heartbeats. 3 things I cannot see. I have stopped trying to explain this. I've been explaining things all night. Faulty readings, altitude, fatigue, carbon monoxide from the stove. I checked. The CO alarm is functioning. Reading 0. I have run out of explanations. So I'm going to just say what is true. There are 3 other living things in this cabin with me. They are not visible. They are not making sounds I can identify. But they have heartbeats, and they have presence, and my count keeps finding them. I think I know what happened to Harwick. He was a birder. I read his file on the way up. Birdwatcher for 20 years, kept meticulous counts of every species he ever observed. Counting was his thing, the way it's my thing. He came out here for a standard 2-week patrol, and something in this cabin, something about this specific location, this specific spot, started giving him wrong numbers. And he did what any counter does. He tried to get the count right. He started over. He counted more carefully. He counted the walls, the ceiling, the floor, trying to find the source of the error. Trying to isolate the variable that was off. He never isolated it. Because the variable isn't in the room. The variable is the room. I think something is thin here. Not a hole, not a door, just thin. Like a spot in an old piece of cloth that's been rubbed too long. And on the other side of the thin place, there are things that don't exist in the way we exist. They don't have bodies. They don't make sound. But they have presence. They have number. They can be counted. And Harwick counted them. And when he did, when his count found them, they found him back. He kept counting because if he stopped, he wouldn't know where they were. I understand that now. I understand it in my body. The moment I stopped counting for more than a few minutes tonight, the heartbeat by the bunk moved. I know it moved because when I started counting again, it was closer to me than before. The count is the only way I can track them. The count is the only thing keeping them at a distance I can understand. But here is what scares me more than any of this. I tried to stop counting. I really tried. I sat in the center of the floor and I looked at the wall and I told myself, do not count the marks. Do not count your breaths. Do not count anything. Just be in the room. Just be here without measuring it. I lasted 11 seconds. The habit is too deep. It's not something I do consciously anymore. It's something I am. The counting happens before I decide to count. It's in me the way breathing is in me. And as long as I'm counting, they know I'm here. And as long as they know I'm here, they're getting closer. The one near the door is not near the door anymore. I can feel it pulse, pulse, pulse somewhere to my left, maybe 4 feet away. When I count now, I get 5 heartbeats. 2 of them are mine. I don't know what that means. I don't want to know. I'm going to lie down. I'm going to close my eyes. I'm going to count backward from 1,000 and pretend that when I open them, the numbers will be what they should be. Current count, 3 presences. Closest, approximately 3 feet, north side of the bunk. At least the count is steady. At least that's something. At least I know where they are. I'm going to close my eyes now. I packed in the dark. I did not make coffee. I did not eat. I was on my skis before the sun touched the tops of the peaks, and I did not look back at the cabin when I left. I want to be specific about why I didn't look back. It wasn't because I was afraid of what I would see. It was because I was afraid of what I would count. The return trip took 9 hours. I know the investigators noted this in the file. Yes, that is fast. Yes, that pace is physically remarkable for those conditions, for that terrain. After a sleepless night, I am aware of that. I did not stop. I did not rest. I skied until my legs stopped working the right way, and then I skied harder. And I counted every single step, and every single tree, and every single breath, and I kept the numbers running in my head like a machine, like a wall, like something to hide behind. Because for the first 3 miles, the heartbeat was still there. Not mine, the other one. The slow, heavy one that had been by the door. I could feel it in the snow through my ski poles when I planted them. Pulse, 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 slower than mine, heavier, like something very large breathing at the bottom of a frozen lake. It stopped at mile 4. I know exactly where because I counted. Step 8,847 from the cabin door. I planted my poles, and the pulse was there, and on step 8,848 it was gone. I stood very still for about 30 seconds. I counted my own heartbeat. 91 beats per minute, elevated, which was understandable, just mine, only mine. I kept skiing. I filed my debrief at 18:03 hours. I sat across from Officer Renata Voss, who asked me the standard questions in the standard order. I answered them calmly. I recommended the decommissioning of Cabin 7C. I cited structural concerns, which was not entirely a lie. A structure that causes the psychological symptoms I observed is, in my view, structurally compromised. She asked me what happened to Harwick. I told her. He is still in that cabin, not his body. But the part of him that counted things, that part is still there. His count got high enough that he couldn't leave it behind. I think he crossed a number I didn't cross. I don't know what that number is, and I do not want to. She wrote something on her notepad. She asked if I felt okay to drive home. I said yes. She asked, because she is thorough and she noticed. Ranger Cortland, what were you counting just now, coming through the front door? I told her the truth because I was too tired to do anything else. People, I said. There are 11 people in this building right now. She frowned. There are 9 people on duty today. I know, I said. I counted twice. I drove home. I made tea. I sat at my kitchen table and I counted the chairs in the room. 4 chairs. I counted them 5 times and got 4 every single time, and I felt something loosen in my chest. Relief so sharp it almost hurt, because for the first time in 36 hours, my count was right. I went to bed. I did not sleep. But the count was right, and that was enough. That was enough. The above report, filed by Ranger First Class Ellen Cortland on December 16, 2011, was reviewed, stamped, and archived in the standard manner. Cabin 7C was formally decommissioned on January 3, 2012. Ranger Dale Harwick was listed as a missing person. His case remains open. This footnote is added to document subsequent developments. Between December 16, 2011 and June 1, 2012, Ranger Cortland submitted 14 separate requests to return to the Nyack Coal Creek backcountry area. All 14 were denied. Her final request was received on June 1, 2012. It consisted of a single sheet of standard office paper, filled margin to margin, top to bottom, in very small, very even handwriting. The sheet contained no words, no sentences, no formal request language. It contained only the number 7, repeated until the page had no room left. Ranger Cortland is currently on administrative leave. The reason listed is behavioral concerns following extended field assignment. The incident that prompted the leave. She was observed in her offices on May 28, 2012, by 3 colleagues, counting aloud. She counted for 11 consecutive hours. She did not break for lunch. She did not use the restroom. She did not speak except to count. When her supervisor finally intervened and asked what she was counting, Ranger Cortland looked at him with an expression that he described, in his own incident report, as completely calm, like someone explaining something very simple to someone who should already know it. She said, "Them. They followed me back from the cabin. There are 7 of them in this room right now, and you cannot see a single one of them. And the count hasn't changed in 6 hours, so either they're staying still or I've finally gotten accurate." The room contained, at that time, 4 people. Attached to the back of this file, one scanned image of the Nyack Coal Creek Cabin 7C logbook, final page, final entry. Written by Ranger Dale Harwick. Timestamp, 23 and 47 hours, December 9, 2011. The entry reads, "Total count as of U347 hours. I have counted them and the number is." The sentence ends there. The pen line trails off and stops. Below the entry, in different handwriting identified by the Forensic Documents Examiner as belonging to Ranger Ellen Cortland, a single word has been written. Ranger Cortland was not in Cabin 7C on December 9, 2011. She was not assigned there until December 14th. There is no record of any prior visit. There is no explanation for how her handwriting appears in a logbook entry made 5 days before her arrival. The word she wrote is, "enough." Second footnote. Added by Records Clerk, June 30, 2012. Ranger Cortland's administrative leave status was updated on June 18, 2012. She has not reported to the office in 12 days. Her apartment was checked by a welfare officer on June 19th. No signs of a struggle, personal effects intact, food in the refrigerator, lights left on. Her step counter was found on the kitchen table. It had been reset to 0. We do not know when it was reset. We do not know why. We do not know by whom. Case status, open. I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone. Not my ex-wife, not my captain, not the 2 men in black suits who drove down from Atlanta to officially close the area. I couldn't tell them. Not because I was scared of what they'd think, but because every single time I opened my mouth to describe what I heard out there, I could feel it rising up through my chest like a note of music. And I was terrified that if I let it out, if I actually spoke it into the air, the people in that room would hear it. And if they heard it, even just a tiny piece of it, they'd stop being afraid of it. And that scared me more than anything. My name is Thomas Beauchamp. Most people call me Tommy. I'm 41 years old, born in Folkston, Georgia, which is less than 10 miles from the eastern edge of the Okefenokee Swamp. My grandfather guided fishing boats through those waterways before roads existed out here. My father did the same. By the time I was 4 years old, I had already seen a cottonmouth snake strike at a man's boot, and I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. The swamp was just home. I became a park ranger because there was nowhere else on earth my mind went quiet. Not at home. Not in my marriage, which, to be fair to my ex-wife, wasn't her fault. I was just always somewhere else in my head. But out there, in the Okefenokee, with the black water and the cypress trees so old they lean over the surface like old men looking for something they dropped. Out there, I could breathe. 438,000 acres. Peat bogs up to 15 feet deep. Some of that peat has been building up for 7,000 years. The water is the color of tea because of all the tannins. The canopy is so thick in some places that noon looks like dusk down at water level. Sound moves strange out there. A gator can bellow 20 feet behind you, and it'll sound like it's half a mile away. A bird can call from the other side of the swamp, and it'll feel like it's sitting on your shoulder. I knew every inch of that place. I had paddled every waterway, marked every nest, logged every unusual behavior I'd ever seen. In 17 years, the swamp had never once frightened me. Until October 2016. It was a Tuesday when Dr. Priya Nair showed me the photographs. Priya was a wildlife biologist from the University of Florida. Sharp woman. The kind of scientist who never got excited about anything. Because in her world, excitement meant you'd let your feelings get in front of the facts. I liked that about her. She didn't look sharp that morning. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in several days, and had stopped trying to pretend otherwise. When I walked into the ranger station, she was standing over a table covered in printed photographs, and she had both hands pressed flat on the surface like she needed the table to stay steady. "Close the door," she said. I closed the door. The photographs were stills pulled from the wildlife cameras we had placed deep in the interior of the swamp, 3 miles past the last public access point. In an area most rangers didn't bother checking because nothing of particular interest had ever happened out there. Dense peat bog, low water, hard to reach. The first photo showed a clearing, which was already strange because that area of the swamp didn't have any clearings. Peat bogs don't work that way. They're thick and overgrown. But there it was, a roughly circular open space, maybe 40 feet across, surrounded by cypress trees. And in that clearing, animals, dozens of them, gators, sandhill cranes, wild boar, what looked like a Florida panther crouched low near the edge, herons, rabbits, raccoons, a black bear standing at the back, all of them facing the same direction, all of them completely still. "When was this taken?" I asked. 6 days ago, Priya said. "That's the first one. Keep going." I went through the stack. Every 12 hours, the camera had taken another photo. The clearing was in every single one. And in every single one, the animals were in the same position, facing the same direction, motionless. But in each new photo, there were more of them. More animals had joined. By the 6th photo, the most recent one, taken the previous morning, I counted 257 individual animals. I laid the photos out side by side and looked at them for a long time. "They haven't moved in 6 days, I said. Priya shook her head. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Nothing has eaten, Tom. Nothing has fought. Nothing has left. 6 days predator and prey standing 3 feet apart, and not one of them has moved." She paused. "A heron is standing on the back of a wild boar in the 4th photo. The boar didn't move. The heron didn't move." She looked at me. "I need you to go out there." I looked at the photos one more time, specifically at the deer in the front of the congregation. Its eyes were wide open and wet-looking. Even in a still photo, something about its expression made my stomach drop. Those weren't calm animals. Those were animals that couldn't look away. I left at sunrise the next morning in a flat-bottom John boat. Single paddle. Standard gear plus a satellite phone, which I'd never actually needed before. The kind of thing that makes you feel silly for bringing until the moment you desperately need it. The first hour was normal. The swamp in early morning is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Mist sits on the black water about knee-high. The herons stand in the shallows like gray statues. Spanish moss hangs off the cypress branches like something an old house left behind. I've paddled this stretch so many times I could do it with my eyes closed. The second hour was when things started feeling different. I noticed the quiet first. Not a peaceful quiet. The Okeechobee is never truly silent. There's always sound. Insects, birds, frogs, water. But about 2 miles in, the sounds started dropping out, one layer at a time, like someone was turning down a mixing board. The insects went first, then the frogs, then the birds. For about 15 minutes there was nothing. Just the sound of my paddle and the water. Then the sounds came back, but they came back wrong. The bird calls started overlapping in a way they never do naturally. Different species, different pitches, all going at the same time. But instead of sounding like chaos, it sounded almost organized. Like they were all responding to something. The frog chorus started up in the distance, and I found myself tilting my head, because there was something rhythmic about it. A pattern. Almost like a beat. I shook it off. Sound carries strange in the swamp, I reminded myself. I've known that my whole life. But then, about 3 hours in, I realized my mouth was moving. I was humming. I didn't know when I'd started. I didn't recognize the melody. It wasn't a song I knew, not a tune from the radio or something stuck in my head from morning. It was something else. A single low wandering note that kept almost resolving into something and then pulling back. I stopped the moment I noticed it. The swamp felt very close around me after that, the trees leaning in, the mist thicker than it should have been for that time of day. I paddled faster. I smelled the clearing before I saw it. That's the only way I can describe it. A smell like rain before it hits the ground, but warmer, deeper. Like something old being turned over. The trees opened up and there it was. The photos hadn't done it justice. I want you to understand that. A photograph can show you what something looks like. It cannot show you what something feels like from 30 feet away. And the feeling of that clearing hit me like a wall of warm water the moment the trees parted. A pressure in my chest. Low and wide, like the first note of a church organ heard from inside the building. Not painful, not threatening, just enormous. There were over 300 animals in that clearing. I stood at the edge of the boat and I counted. and I stopped counting at 300 because my hands were shaking too badly to hold my notebook. Every animal was facing the same direction, toward the center of the clearing, toward a spot where the peat was paler than the rest, almost white, almost glowing. I stepped out of the boat. I want to be honest with you. I knew, in the sensible part of my brain, that I should stay in the boat. A 12-foot alligator was lying 5 feet to my left. A Florida panther was crouched 10 feet ahead. These are animals that kill. These are animals that I have personally helped recover human remains from over the years. But the sensible part of my brain was not in charge right now. I walked into the clearing. The gator didn't move, didn't blink. His eyes were open and fixed forward, and there was something in them that I'd never seen in a reptile's eyes before. Something I can only describe as longing. Like he was hearing a sound just barely out of his range and leaning his whole body toward it. I walked past him. I came up beside a white-tailed doe. She was trembling. Every muscle in her body was shaking so fine and fast it looked like she was vibrating. Her eyes were so wide I could see white all the way around the iris. She was terrified. Absolutely, completely terrified. But she didn't run. She couldn't run. Whatever was in the center of that clearing, whatever was producing that pressure in my chest, it had her. It had all of them. And then I felt the first real wave of it hit me. It came up through the soles of my boots, through the ground, up through my legs and spine, and into the base of my skull. A vibration, not quite a sound. More like the idea of a sound. The way you can feel a truck pass on the road before you can hear it. My back molars hummed with it. My vision blurred at the edges, just slightly, for just a second. And then my chest did something I'm not going to be able to explain properly. It opened up. Like something had been squeezed tight in there my whole life, since my divorce, since my dad died, since every small hard thing that accumulates in a grown man's chest over 41 years, and it just released all of it. I wanted to sit down. I wanted to sit down right there in the mud, surrounded by 300 frozen animals, and I wanted to close my eyes and let it take me the rest of the way. I made myself keep walking. The center of the clearing was about 20 feet across. The peat there was pale and thin, almost translucent, like skin over a vein. The other animals hadn't gone this far in. There was an empty space here, a ring of bare ground, like they'd left it open, like they were making room. I knelt down. The glow was real. I'd thought in the photos it might have been a camera trick, a reflection, some trick of the light. It wasn't. Beneath the surface of the thin peat, something was pulsing. A blue-white light, slow and rhythmic, like a heartbeat but slower, one pulse every few seconds, soft, steady. I pressed my hand flat on the ground, and I heard it. 3 seconds. That's all it lasted. 3 seconds of direct contact, and then my arm jerked back on its own. A survival instinct kicking in underneath everything else. Some part of me that was still animal enough to protect self. But in those 3 seconds, I'm going to try to explain this, and I know it's going to sound crazy, but I need you to understand that I am not a man given to crazy explanations. I believe in what I can see and touch and measure. My whole career has been built on observation and facts. What I heard in those 3 seconds was a single, pure, sustained note. That's all. Just a note, a sound. But it was complete. That's the only word I have. Every piece of music I'd ever heard in my life, every song, every sound that had ever moved me, it all felt, in that moment, like someone trying to describe a color they'd never quite gotten right. Like all of music was just attempts at this. And this was the thing that all those attempts had been reaching for. The original, the real one. My entire life, my childhood by the swamp, my marriage, my daughter, every good morning I'd ever had. All of it passed through my mind in those 3 seconds, and every last bit of it felt distant, faded, like a memory of something that happened to someone else. I understood, in my bones, why not a single animal in that clearing had left. Why would you leave? Why would you go back to the pale, quiet, ordinary world when you had heard this? I don't remember standing up. The next clear thing I remember is that I was back at the edge of the clearing, and my nose was bleeding, and I didn't know how I'd gotten in there. Blood dripping off my chin into the black water at the bank. My ears were ringing, high and sharp, like I'd been standing next to speakers at a concert. I got in the boat. I paddled with my eyes mostly closed. I know how that sounds, but every time I opened them, the swamp looked wrong. Not dangerous wrong, just designed. Like every cypress tree was placed exactly where it needed to be. Every vine hanging exactly the right way. Every ripple on the water, moving in a pattern that meant something I was one step away from understanding. And I knew, the way you know things in dreams, that if I stared at it long enough, I would understand it. All of it. The pattern of everything. And if I understood it, I would stop the boat. And I would not start again. So I kept my eyes closed and I paddled by memory, and it took 3.5 hours instead of 4. And when I finally bumped against the dock at the access point and opened my eyes, I sat there for a full 10 minutes just breathing. I filed my report the next morning. I wrote that I had confirmed the congregation event, that I had observed over 300 animals in the clearing, and that I had identified what I believed to be a rare infrasound event being produced by geological pressure in the deep peat. Low-frequency vibration, potentially affecting animal behavior. I recommended immediate permanent closure of the interior access routes. The area was closed within 48 hours. I told myself it was over. 3 weeks later, I was sitting at my kitchen table watching my daughter Maya do her homework. She's 13. Smart kid. She gets her mother's patience and my stubbornness, which is a combination that is going to take her very far in life and also make her a nightmare to live with. I was drinking coffee, and she was doing algebra, and everything was perfectly normal. Then she started humming, a low, wandering note, almost resolving into something and then pulling back. My coffee mug stopped halfway to my mouth. I knew that melody. I had been humming it in the boat. I hadn't hummed it since, had been actively, consciously stopping myself every time I felt the urge. But I knew it the way you know your own heartbeat. Instantly, completely. "Maya," I said, and my voice came out strange, too careful. "Where did you hear that?" She looked up from her homework. Gave me the mildly irritated look that 13-year-olds give their parents when they've been interrupted. "Hear what? That melody you were just humming." She thought about it, shrugged. "I don't know. I think," she tilted her head. "You were humming it in your sleep last night, Dad." I heard it through the wall. I put my coffee mug down very slowly. I sat with that information for a moment. And then, in the way that terrible things sometimes come together all at once, the full shape of it hit me. I had been home for 3 weeks. I had spoken to Priya. I had spoken to my captain. I had spoken to the 2 men from Atlanta. I had spoken to my ex-wife on the phone about Maya's schedule. I had spoken to the man at the gas station, the woman at the grocery store, my neighbor, Bill, who was retired and who I'd chatted with over the fence 3 or 4 times. The sound hadn't traveled in the air. You couldn't catch it from the air. It traveled in the voice. Something about 3 seconds of direct contact had embedded that note somewhere deep in my vocal cords, in the vibration of my voice when I spoke. Not loud enough to stop anyone in their tracks. Not loud enough to freeze them where they stood, like the animals in the clearing, but loud enough to leave a trace. A seed. Everyone I had spoken to in 3 weeks had heard a faint echo of that note buried in my words. They didn't know what they'd heard. They couldn't name it. But it was there now, in them, the way a song gets stuck in your head and you can't stop humming it. And they had spoken to people. And those people had spoken to people. I sat at my kitchen table in the lamplight while my daughter went back to her homework. And I thought about how many people live within a day's drive of Folkston, Georgia. I thought about phones. About how my voice traveled through wires and signals and speakers into people's ears. About how many conversations I had had in 3 weeks without thinking twice. I thought about what happens when a seed takes root. I left before Maya woke up the next morning. I wrote her a letter. I told her she was the best thing in my life, and that she had her mother's patience and her grandfather's toughness, and that she was going to be just fine. I told her not to be scared. I told her that the world was stranger and deeper than most people ever got to know, and that she lived in the most beautiful place on earth, and she should go out in it and look at it and not be afraid of what she found. I folded the letter and left it on the passenger seat of my truck, parked at the eastern access point. The paddle-in was easy. The swamp was quiet in the way it had been quiet before, the right kind of quiet. The kind that means everything is exactly where it should be. The clearing was bigger than I remembered. Or maybe there were just more animals now. Over 500, I think, though I stopped counting quickly. They had made room for me the way they had made room in the center before. A path, almost. Between the gator and the deer and the boar and the bear, a clear line straight to the center. I sat down. The peat was warm beneath me. The glow was brighter than before, steady and slow and blue-white and patient. Patient like something that has been waiting for 7,000 years and has no particular problem with waiting a little longer. The vibration moved up through me like a tide coming in, and I finally let it. The doe next to me was still trembling. I reached out and put my hand on her neck, gently, and after a moment, she stopped. We sat there together, in the middle of everything, the gator and the bear and the panther and the heron standing still as wood. And the sound came up through the ground and into us. And the ordinary world, the fluorescent lights and the alarm clocks and the arguments and the loneliness and all the beautiful, exhausting noise of being a person, It all fell away, I cried. I want to be honest about that. I sat in the mud in the middle of the Okefenokee swamp, and I cried like I hadn't cried since my father's funeral. Not from fear, not from sadness, from relief, because I finally understood what I was looking at. This wasn't a trap. The thing beneath the peat wasn't hunting us. It wasn't calling us to destroy us, or consume us, or do any of the things that creatures in dark places are supposed to do in stories like this one. It was just singing. It had always been singing. For 7,000 years, alone down there in the dark and the peat and the deep still water, singing the most honest, true, complete note in the universe. And every living thing that got close enough to hear it stopped. Not because it couldn't leave, but because the moment you heard it, you realized something that nothing in your regular life had ever told you. That you had been listening for it your whole life. That every piece of music that ever made you pull over to the side of the road and sit with your eyes closed. Every sunset that hit you harder than you expected. Every moment of real, genuine quiet. You had been leaning toward this. Toward the original note underneath all of it. I wasn't afraid. The animals weren't afraid. We were just finally, completely still. And as the glow pulsed warm and slow beneath me, and the swamp held us all together in the dark, the only thing left in my mind was one last clear thought, before the thought went too. That the silence waiting for me back in the normal world. The silence of a house without music. Of a drive with the radio off. Of a life that didn't know what it was missing. That was the only silence left to fear. Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, Interior Zone 7, was permanently closed to all access on November 14, 2016. No official reason was given to the public. The wildlife camera images were classified. Dr. Priya Nair resigned from the University of Florida in December 2016. Thomas Beauchamp was reported missing on October 31, 2016. His truck was found at the eastern access point. A letter was found on the passenger seat. The letter has never been released. The animals in Zone 7 are still there. All of them. Still. I need someone to tell me I'm wrong. I've watched the footage 40 times now. 41. I'm sitting in my truck in the parking lot of a Waffle House off Route 441, and my hands won't stop shaking. So I'm recording this because I need a record. I need proof that I said something, that I tried. Deputy Williams had his body camera running when Aaron Suttles walked out of the woods today. Wide angle. Caught the whole parking lot. I counted 19 people in that shot. Searchers, deputies, volunteers, a couple of hikers who had nothing to do with any of it. 19 people. I've studied the way things move for my entire adult life. Bears, elk, deer, coyotes, people. I can tell you which bear is coming down a ridge just from the rhythm of its walk. That's not a brag. That's just what I do, what I am. And I need someone to tell me I'm wrong. Because I've watched the footage 41 times. And 3 of those 19 people are walking with a stride length of exactly 31 inches. Exactly. I'm going to start from the beginning. My name is Marcus Cole. I'm a law enforcement ranger with the National Park Service, stationed in the Great Smoky Mountains, Tennessee side. On October 14, 2021, I was called to assist in the search for a missing hiker named Aaron Suttles, age 27, solo backpacker. Last known location, Hazel Creek Trail. I got to the trailhead at 8 in the morning. October in the Smokies is the busiest time of the year. The leaves were peaking. The mountains looked like somebody had set them on fire. Red, orange, gold, all of it burning in the morning sun. Beautiful. The kind of day that makes you feel stupid for ever worrying about anything. There were about a dozen of us at the briefing. Rangers, a couple of sheriff's deputies, some volunteer searchers. Standard missing person protocol. Aaron had a permit for a backcountry campsite near Hazel Creek. He was due out 2 days ago, never showed. His car was still in the lot. Blue Subaru, bumper stickers, nothing unusual. I was paired with a volunteer named Donna. Good woman. Mid-50s, retired teacher, had done maybe 30 searches over the years. Knew the trails. Talked a lot when she was nervous, which was fine. Nervous is normal out here. We started up the trail at about 8:30. I noticed the boot prints within the first mile. Now, I want to be clear. When I say I noticed them, I don't mean they were strange. Not at first. They were the right size. Right tread pattern. Matched the brand Aaron's family said he wore. They were heading in the right direction. Everything checked out. Except the stride. I said it out loud just to get it on camera. Stride's mechanical. Like a metronome. Donna asked me what I meant. I told her that when people hike, their steps change. You shorten up going uphill. You lengthen going down. You step over roots, step around rocks. Your stride is alive. It reacts to the ground. These prints didn't react to anything. Every step was the same distance apart. 31 inches, up, down, flat, rough, smooth. 31 inches, exactly. Donna said maybe he was just a steady walker. I didn't argue, but I felt something cold settle into my stomach, and it didn't leave. The deeper we went, the worse it got. About 2 miles in, the trail runs alongside a patch of wild blackberry. Thick stuff, thorns like fish hooks. Every hiker in history has gone around it. There's a clear path where thousands of boots have worn the dirt smooth. Aaron's prints went straight through the middle, not around, not over, through. Straight line, 31-inch stride. I pushed a branch aside and looked. The thorns should have torn his clothes apart, should have torn his skin apart, but the prints just marched through like the bramble wasn't there. A mile later, the trail crosses Hazel Creek. There's a footbridge, wooden, solid, been there for years, everyone uses it. Aaron's prints had walked straight into the creek, not to the bridge, not across the shallows where you could rock hop, through the deepest part, right through the center. The prints came out the other side and kept going. Same stride, same distance. Donna was quiet now. The forest was quiet too, and that bothered me more than the prints. October in the Smokies, you should hear everything. Birds, squirrels, the creek, wind in the leaves. But the woods around us had gone still the way they go still when something big is nearby. Something that doesn't belong. I know that silence. I've spent a decade learning what it means. It means pay attention. We found Aaron's campsite at 11:34. It was perfect, and I mean that in a way that made my skin crawl. The tent was up, staked properly, rainfly tight. The food bag was hanging from a bare cable, exactly the way you're supposed to do it. 12 feet up, 4 feet from the trunk. His cook pot was clean and stored. His boots were set neatly beside the tent opening. Everything was textbook. Like someone had read a manual on how a campsite should look and followed every instruction to the letter. Donna said, well, at least he knew what he was doing. I was looking at the boot prints. They left the tent and walked due north. Due north from that campsite is a ravine wall, not a slope, not a steep hill. A near vertical rock face, 60 feet of moss-covered stone dropping straight down to a creek bed full of boulders. No trail goes north, no reason to go north. Nothing is north except a fall that would kill you. I walked to the edge and looked down. The boot prints went over. They continued down the vertical rock face. 31-inch stride, evenly spaced. Like something had walked straight down the wall the way you and I walk down a hallway. Donna was standing behind me. She looked. She said, that's not possible. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, staring at those prints going down a cliff face like gravity was a suggestion. And I felt the cold thing in my stomach turn into something worse. I felt certain. If you've never been in Smoky Mountain fog, I need you to understand something. It's not like regular fog. It doesn't drift in, it arrives. 1 minute you can see 100 yards up the trail. The next minute you can see 15 feet, maybe 10. The world just closes around you like a fist, and everything beyond that circle of visibility is gone. Not hidden, gone. The fog came in at 1:47. Donna and I were heading back down the trail toward the trailhead. I'd radioed in what we'd found, the campsite, the prints, the ravine. I didn't mention the impossible parts. I just said the tracks were inconsistent and we needed a bigger team. I was trying to be professional about something that had no professional explanation. Then I heard the footsteps. Ahead of us. On the trail. Coming from the direction of the trailhead, which meant coming toward us. They were steady. Rhythmic. Exactly the sound a person makes when they walk with a stride of 31 inches on packed dirt. I stopped. Donna stopped. I called out. Aaron Suttles? The footsteps stopped. The silence lasted maybe 5 seconds. 5 of the longest seconds of my life. Then the footsteps started again. But the rhythm was different. The stride had changed. It was longer now. More uneven. A slight drag on the left foot. A heavier landing on the right. My stride. That's my walk. The left drag is from a torn meniscus I never got fixed. The right landing is from a habit I picked up running ultramarathons. Nobody would know that pattern unless they studied me. I hadn't walked yet. I'd been standing still when I called out. It heard my voice, just my voice, and from that it figured out how I move. Donna whispered, Marcus, someone's coming. I put my hand on her arm. I didn't say a word, but I pulled her off the trail, into the trees, and I made us stand absolutely still. The footsteps passed us. My stride, my rhythm, my limp, going the wrong direction, heading deeper into the woods. Walking like me into a place I've never been. We waited 5 minutes. Then we got back on the trail and moved fast. Not fast enough. It was standing in the trail, 15 feet ahead, right at the edge of what the fog would let us see. Like it knew exactly how far our eyes could reach and placed itself at the border. It was wearing Aaron's clothes. The same green rain jacket, the same gray hiking pants, the same pack, the same boots, the same brown baseball cap. It was walking toward us. I radioed. Stop where you are, Park Service, identify yourself. It stopped. It stood perfectly still. Not the way a person stands still, where you shift your weight and breathe and blink. It stopped like someone hit pause. Total freeze. Every muscle locked. Donna let out a breath beside me. Oh, thank God, she said. He's okay. I didn't answer. My body camera was recording, and I need you to understand what it captured. What I saw. What Donna couldn't see from where she was standing. Its feet were not touching the ground. It was walking. The legs were moving. The arms were swinging. The weight was shifting left to right to left, exactly the way a body does when it walks. It was performing every part of walking, 6 inches above the trail. It had learned what walking looks like, but it didn't know that walking means touching the ground. It copied the motion and missed the point. And then its head turned toward me. Aaron Suttle's face. I'd seen his picture at the briefing that morning. Brown hair, brown eyes, thin nose, gap between the front teeth. It was him. Every detail was right. But the expression, it wasn't blank. That would have been easier. It was trying. The face was working through options, like flipping through a deck of cards. First, surprise, the eyebrows went up, the mouth opened, but too wide, too slow, like a child doing a school play. Second, fear. The eyes went big, the lips pulled back, but the forehead was smooth. Fear without worry. Third, relief. A long exhale, shoulders dropping, but the eyes didn't change. The eyes stayed in fear while the mouth did relief. Fourth, a smile. Exactly right. The smile a lost hiker gives the people who came to find him. Grateful, tired, a little embarrassed. I've seen that smile 100 times on real people at the end of real searches. But it arrived fourth, after a selection process. After I watched the face audition 3 wrong emotions before finding the correct one. Donna started to walk toward it. I grabbed her arm so hard she yelped. I pulled her backward. I turned us around. And I ran. I have never run like that. Not in any ultramarathon, not in any training, not ever. I ran the way an animal runs when it knows what's behind it. Donna kept up. Fear is a hell of a fuel. And behind us, in the fog, the footsteps followed. They matched us. Exactly. Every change I made, it made. When I sped up, it sped up. When I cut left, I heard it cut left. It was like running from my own echo, so I tested it. I started changing my stride on purpose. I limped hard, the footsteps limped. I sprinted, they sprinted. I skipped a step, stutter-stepped, dragged my foot. Each time there was a gap, maybe 2 seconds, maybe 3. It would stumble, I could hear it, and then it would catch up, adapt, lock in. It was learning, in real time. Every mistake I gave it, it corrected. Every new pattern, it absorbed. It was getting better with every step. Then Donna fell. A root caught her boot and she went down hard, face first into the dirt. I spun around, reached down, and there were 2 of her. One on the ground. Mud on her face, leaves in her hair, blood on her lip, eyes wide and full of real human terror. One standing beside her, clean, upright, reaching toward me with one hand, smiling. The standing one said, "I'm okay, help me up." The one on the ground didn't say anything. She just looked at me with eyes that begged. I pulled up the one who was afraid. We ran. We didn't look back. The footsteps followed for another quarter mile, and then, like a radio being switched off, they stopped. The fog began to thin. The trees opened up. We saw the parking lot. There were maybe 20 people at the trailhead when we came out of the woods. Other search teams, deputies, a couple of EMTs waiting by an ambulance just in case. And standing near the hood of a sheriff's cruiser, talking calmly to Deputy Williams, was Aaron Suttles. Alive, smiling, wearing clean, dry versions of the same clothes I'd seen in the fog. He was telling Williams he'd gotten lost, spent a night off trail, found his way back to an old forest road, and walked out. Simple, believable, the kind of story that happens 50 times a year. Everyone was relieved. People were clapping him on the back. Someone handed him a bottle of water. Donna looked at me like, "See? He's fine." I watched him walk 31 inches, exactly, every step the same, across the gravel, across the asphalt. No adjustment, no variation. The same mechanical stride I'd followed for miles through impossible terrain. Deputy Williams clapped him on the shoulder. "Glad you're safe, buddy." Aaron's face did the thing. It started with nothing, a blank reset, like a screen going dark for half a second. Then the options, humble first, then surprised, then something that wasn't quite an emotion at all, more like a placeholder, then grateful. The right answer. The face a young man makes when a kind stranger is glad he's alive. Nobody noticed. Because why would they? He looked right, he sounded right. He was close enough. Close enough is all it takes. Aaron Suttles got in his blue Subaru. He started the engine. He drove out of the parking lot, took a right on the highway, and headed toward Bryson City, toward the gas stations and grocery stores and neighborhoods and schools. I said nothing. Who would I tell? What would I say? The man you just watched drive away is not a man. Something in the fog copied him like a photograph and sent the copy out. I know because his walk is wrong. They'd think I was broken. Maybe I am. I went back to my truck. I sat there for a long time. Then I pulled up the footage. Deputy Williams' body cam captures the whole parking lot in a wide shot when Aaron walks out of the woods. I requested it for the case file. Standard procedure. I watched it once, then again, then again. I started counting. In gait analysis, every person has a signature. It's like a fingerprint. No two people walk exactly the same way, because no two people have the same body, the same injuries, the same habits, the same life. Your walk is the story of everything you've ever done, written in motion, unless you don't have a story. Unless you never learned. Unless you just copied someone else's stride and used it like a mask. 19 people in that footage. Searchers, deputies, hikers, volunteers. Person 1, normal gait, variable stride. Favors the right leg. Person 2, normal. Short steps, probably tired. Person 3, 31 inches. Exactly. I went cold. Person 4 through 11, all normal. Real people with real walks. Person 12, 31 inches. Exactly. My hands were shaking. Person 13 through 18, normal. Person 19, 31 inches. Exactly. 3 out of 19. Standing among the rescuers, talking to deputies. Shaking hands. Smiling at the right times. I've been sitting in this Waffle House parking lot for 4 hours now. I've watched the footage 41 times. I keep hoping I miscounted. I keep hoping I'm wrong. But I'm not wrong. I've studied gait my entire career. This is the one thing in the world I cannot be wrong about. 3 of those people are not people. And I don't know how long they've been here. I don't know how many there are. All I know is what to look for now. And I wish to God I didn't. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. I went into the Waffle House to get coffee. I sat at the counter. A man walked past the window outside. 31 inches. A woman crossed the parking lot toward her car. 31 inches. A teenager on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, headed nowhere in particular. 31 inches, exactly. How long have they been here? How many of them walked out of that fog? And the question that won't let me sleep. The one that sits in my chest like a stone. How many of the people I've rescued over the years walked out of those woods with a stride of exactly 31 inches? And I just never thought to check. This is Ranger Marcus Cole, badge number 44-1, Great Smoky Mountains National Park. If you're listening to this, do me a favor. Next time you're in a crowd, watch how people walk. Really watch. And if you see someone whose stride never changes, not on stairs, not on a hill, not stepping over a crack in the sidewalk, if every single step is exactly the same distance as the last, don't let them know you noticed. Recording ends. File recovered from SanDisk SD card. Found in a 2018 Toyota Tacoma registered as Cole. Discovered in the Waffle House parking lot off Route 441, Bryson City, North Carolina. Vehicle was unlocked. Engine cold. Ranger Cole has not reported for duty in 11 days. His badge was found on the driver's seat. His boots were missing. The search is ongoing. Stride analysis of the search team has not been conducted. I want to tell you something, and I need you to believe me. Not because it sounds true, not because it makes sense, but because I wrote it down, every word, every day. And the journal they found in that lookout tower, the last few lines, those weren't written by me. Something else held the pen. This is what happened to me in the Chihuahua Desert in the summer of 2003. And the part at the end, the part I can't tell you myself, because I wasn't around to tell it, that comes from the people who went looking. They found things. They found enough. The truck that brought me to the lookout didn't even stop all the way. Danny, the ranger driving, slowed down just enough for me to jump off the back with my bags. He leaned out the window, grinned, and said, 11 days, Vega. Try not to go crazy. Then he drove away, and the dust swallowed the truck. And then the silence hit me. I don't mean quiet. Quiet is a library. Quiet is a room with the TV off. This was something else. This was the desert reaching into your ears and pulling the sound out. Like the land itself didn't want noise. Like it was offended by it. I stood there for a full minute, just listening. Nothing. No birds. No wind. Not even insects. Just the sun pressing down on everything like a hot hand. The lookout was a small wooden tower on stilts, maybe 20 feet up. Old fire lookout hadn't been used for real in years. They set it up as a temporary monitoring station. Drought assessment, they said. Water table readings, wildlife camera checks, heat surveys, boring stuff. Important but boring. I didn't care. I wanted this. Back in Colorado, I worked a visitor center desk, handed out maps, smiled at tourists, told people where the bathrooms were. I didn't become a ranger to point at bathrooms. My mother thought I was insane. Lucida, you have air conditioning. You have a desk. You have a job where nothing tries to kill you. She said this on the phone the night before I left, and I could hear her stirring something on the stove. Beans, probably. She always made beans when she was upset. My mother crossed the border pregnant with me, in August heat worse than anything Big Bend could throw. She didn't do that so her daughter could go back to the desert on purpose. It's 11 days, Mama, I told her. 11 days is a long time to be alone, she said. She was right about that. She was right about most things. So when Big Bend needed someone for an 11-day solo rotation in the Chihuahuan Desert, middles of summer, 112-degree days, no vehicle after drop-off, radio check-ins every 12 hours. I raised my hand before anyone else could. Day one was fine. I unpacked, set up my station, tested the radio, took readings, everything by the book. The lookout had a cot, a desk, a small shelf with water jugs, and windows on all 4 sides. From up there, I could see for miles. Flat, cracked earth in every direction, with the Chisos Mountains sitting on the horizon like teeth. Day 2 was the same. I walked my route, checked the cameras, logged the numbers, drank my water, did my job. That evening, I heated a can of soup on the little propane burner and ate it sitting on the platform steps, watching the sun go down. The sky turned colors I don't have words for. Pink isn't right. Gold isn't right. It was like the sky was bruising in reverse, getting more alive as the light left. I missed my mother's beans. But that night, I wrote something in my journal that I didn't fully understand until later. I wrote, "It's not that there's no sound. It's that the desert is actively canceling it. Like the silence here has weight, like it's doing something." I should have paid more attention to that feeling. The feeling that the silence wasn't empty. It was full of something waiting. Day 3 is when everything changed. It was around noon. The sun was straight overhead, white and angry. I stepped outside to take a temperature reading, and I looked down. No shadow. I stopped walking. I looked at my feet. The ground was bright, sunlit, flat, and there was nothing under me. No dark shape, no outline, nothing. I held up my hand. I could see my hand, obviously, but below it, on the wooden railing of the lookout, no shadow. I picked up my water bottle and held it out. The bottle cast a shadow, a perfect, clean, dark little shape on the wood. I put the bottle down, held out my hand again. Nothing. I walked down the stairs, stood on the bare ground. The desert floor was so bright it almost hurt to look at. Every rock, every scrub brush, every crack in the earth had a shadow. Short little noon shadows, but they were there. Mine wasn't. I turned around, walked in circles, jumped, waved my arms. I must have looked insane. It didn't matter. There was no one to see me for 30 miles, no shadow, anywhere, under any light, from any angle. I went back inside and drank 2 full bottles of water. I told myself it was heat stroke. Had to be. The heat out here could do things to your eyes, your brain. I'd read the training materials. Visual distortions, hallucinations, confusion. This was just that. Except I didn't feel confused. I felt sharp. Clear. Too clear. Day 4. Same thing. I tested it first thing in the morning when the shadows were long. Everything around me stretched out dark and cool to the west. My canteen shadow. My boot shadow when I set them on the ground. The lookout shadow. A big rectangle on the dirt. But where my body should have printed itself onto the earth. Nothing. Just light. Like the sun didn't know I was standing there. I radioed base that afternoon. Kept my voice casual. "Hey, quick question. Can extreme heat affect shadow visibility? Like, mess with how you see them?" The guy on the other end laughed. "You mean like a mirage?" "Yeah, heat can do weird things to your eyes. Stay hydrated, Vega." "Yeah," I said. That's what I figured. I didn't push it. Because what was I going to say? My shadow is gone? They'd pull me out. Put it in my file. The woman who cracked on a solo rotation. I'd be back at the visitor center pointing at bathrooms before the week was out. So I said nothing. That night, I stood inside the lookout with a flashlight. I pointed it at the wall and put my hand in front of it. No shadow on the wall. The flashlight made shadows of everything else. The desk, the chair, the water jugs. But my hand, nothing. Like light passed right through me. Like I wasn't solid anymore. I sat on the cot and pressed my palms together hard, just to feel it's all real. Still here. Still taking up space. The light said otherwise. The light said I was already gone. Day 5. I'll remember it for the rest of my life. However long that turns out to be. Morning. I was on the lookout platform with my binoculars, doing a sweep. Same thing I'd done every morning. Scanning the desert floor for animal activity, camera status lights, anything out of the ordinary, and I saw it. About a quarter mile out to the east. A dark shape on the ground, person-shaped. Flat, not standing up, but pressed against the desert floor. Like someone had painted a silhouette onto the sand. But there was nothing above it. No person, no pole, no rock formation. Nothing that could cast a shape like that. It was just there, A human-shaped darkness lying on the bright earth. I adjusted the binoculars, focused. The shape was sharp, not blurry like a heat mirage. It had edges. Clean, defined edges. I could see the head shape, the shoulders, the arms. Then I lowered the binoculars and shifted my weight to my left foot. The shape moved. Not drifted, not slowly changed. It moved exactly when I moved and exactly the way I moved. I shifted left, it shifted left. I stepped back, slid closer. I froze, it froze. I raised my right arm. Out on the desert floor, a quarter-mile away, the dark shape raised its right arm. I ran inside, slammed the door. Sat on the cot with my knees pulled up and my heart beating so hard I could hear it in my teeth. After an hour, I made myself look out the window. It was still there. Closer now, still shaped like me. I went to the shelf and pulled out the station binder. An old 3-ring thing full of yellowed papers, previous ranger's notes, weather data, maps. I don't know what I was looking for. Something. Anything that would tell me someone had seen this before. Near the back, I found a handwritten page, no date, no name. Just a note, in shaky handwriting, that said, "Old Comanche trail guides spoke of something in the deep flats. The people who lived here before them had a name for it. Rough translation, the one who walks where you don't. They did not go to the flats alone. They did not have a word for getting it back." I read that line 4 times. They did not have a word for getting it back. I wrote in my field log that evening. My hand was steady, but my letters were small, pressed hard into the paper. Something is out there. It is not an animal. I didn't radio it in, because what was I going to say? I watched it through the window until the sun went down. And when the light faded, the shape didn't disappear. It blended, like it sank into the ground, like it became part of the dark. That was worse. I started measuring. I had a rangefinder in my kit, standard equipment for distance readings. Day 6, I pointed it at the shape first thing in the morning. 400 yards. I wrote it down. I did my work. I tried to act normal. Every hour I checked. 400 yards, 400 yards, 400 yards. Then, just before sunset, 380. Day 7, morning reading, 200 yards. It had covered 200 yards overnight, while I slept. While I lay on that cot in the dark, it had crept closer. Not fast, not in a rush, just steady, like something walking at a pace it had chosen a long time ago. A pace that said, "I have done this before. I know how long it takes." That afternoon I called my mother on the radio. Not really. I picked up the handset, held it to my mouth, and talked without pressing the transmit button. I told her she was right. 11 days was too long to be alone. I told her about the beans and how I wished I had some. I told her I was scared. Then I put the radio down. The desert silence filled the space where her answer should have been. Day 8, morning. I didn't even need the rangefinder anymore. 100 yards. Close enough to see details, and the details were wrong. Because the shape on the ground, the dark flat figure pressed against the sand, was me, my exact outline, my hair, my shoulders, the way I stand with my weight on my left hip. It was my silhouette, perfect, like someone had traced around my body with ink while I was lying down. I raised my arm. It raised its arm. I turned my head. It turned its head. Same time, same speed, no delay. Then it did something that stopped my breathing. I was standing still, both hands at my sides, not moving, and the shape tilted its head, slow, deliberate, like a dog hearing a strange noise, like something curious. I hadn't moved, I was frozen, but it tilted its head on its own and held that angle for 3, 4, 5 seconds, studying me, deciding something. Then it snapped back to mirroring my posture, and it was like it never happened. But it happened. It moved without me. It did something I didn't do, which meant it wasn't just my shadow. It was something wearing my shape, and for 1 second, it forgot to pretend. I stopped eating after that. Couldn't. My stomach felt like a fist. I drank water because I knew I had to, but food tasted like sand. Everything tasted like sand. Day 9, 70 yards. And then the sound. It was around 2 in the morning. I was sitting on the cot, back against the wall, flashlight in my lap, not sleeping, just sitting, listening to that huge, awful silence. And then I heard it. A soft sound, like fabric being dragged across rock, like someone pulling a bedsheet slowly over rough concrete. It was outside, close, right against the wall of the lookout. It moved. I could track it, along the east wall, around the corner, along the north wall, slow, patient, not trying to get in, just circling. I held the radio in my hand so tight my fingers ached. I could press the button. I could call base. I could beg someone to come get me. But the truck couldn't come until day 11. That was the deal. No vehicle access until scheduled pickup. Even if they sent someone, it would take hours. Half a day, maybe more. I was alone with it, whatever it was. The sound circled the lookout 4 times. Then it stopped, right at the door. I sat there with the flashlight pointed at the door until the sun came up. 6 hours. I didn't move. I didn't blink more than I had to. In my journal, sometime around 4 a.m., I wrote with a hand I could barely keep steady. It's patient. That's what scares me most. It's not in a hurry. It knows I can't leave. One more night. That's what I told myself. One more night, and the truck comes, and I get in and I leave, and this becomes a story I tell no one, ever. I spent the day inside, didn't go out, didn't take readings, didn't check cameras. For the first time in 10 days, I skipped my field duties entirely. I didn't care. Let them write me up. Let them fire me. I was not going outside. From the window, I could see it. The shape, my shape, 40 yards out. Just lying on the bright ground, sharp and dark and perfectly still, waiting. At one point in the afternoon, I watched a jackrabbit run across the desert floor. Its path took it right across the shape. The rabbit hit the edge of the dark outline and stopped dead. Just froze. Stood there for maybe 2 seconds, ears flat, body locked. Then it bolted. Not forward, not across, but straight back the way it came, running like something had burned it. The animals knew. The desert knew. I was the only one stupid enough to still be here. Sunset came. The sky turned orange, then red, then purple. The shape blended into the growing dark the way it always did. Not disappearing, just joining. Becoming part of the night. And then the night became something else. The dragging sound started earlier this time. Before full dark. Before the stars were even out. And it wasn't circling anymore. It was pressing. I could hear it, feel it, pushing against the walls. Not hard, not violent. More like a person leaning against a door they know will eventually open. I put my hand on the wall. It was warm. Not sun warm. The sun had been down for an hour. The wood should have been cooling. But the wall was warm the way skin is warm. The way a living thing is warm. I spread my fingers against the grain and I swear on everything, I felt it pulse once. Faint. Like a heartbeat on the other side. I pulled my hand back so fast I knocked over a water jug. I crouched down and shined my flashlight under the door. There's a gap, maybe an inch, between the bottom of the door and the platform floor. The flashlight beam should have shot straight through and hit the ground outside. It didn't. Something was blocking it. Something dark, flat, pressed tight against the other side of the door. The light hit it and stopped dead. Not reflected, not scattered, absorbed, eaten, and I did something I can't explain. I sat down on the floor, cross-legged, facing the door, and I spoke to it. What do you want? The desert silence that followed was different. I'd spent 10 days in silence. I knew what empty silence felt like. This wasn't empty. This was the silence of a room where someone is sitting very still, listening to you, deciding what to do next. I know you're there, I said. My voice was cracked and thin. I sounded like a stranger. I've known since day 3. Nothing. That note in the binder. The one who walks where you don't. That's you, isn't it? Nothing. But the warmth on the wall behind me grew by 1 degree. I felt it on my back, through my shirt. I can't give you what you want, I whispered. The silence held for a long time. A minute, maybe 10. Then the warmth faded. The gap under the door cleared. The flashlight beam shot through and hit the ground outside like normal. It pulled back. Not far, probably. Just enough. I sat on the floor with my back against the cot and I cried. First time in 11 days. First time in years, maybe. I cried the way I did when I was little, and my mother would hold me and say, "Ya ya mija ya paso." But nobody said that now. Nobody held me. I was alone on a dark floor in a wooden box in the middle of nothing, and something that shouldn't exist was waiting outside to finish what it started. I didn't sleep. I watched the dark. I waited for morning like a child waiting for a parent to come home. Counting seconds, counting breaths. Dawn came slow and golden, and I almost broke apart with relief. Morning light poured through the windows, and the world looked like it was trying to apologize. I stood up. My legs were stiff, my back screamed, my eyes burned. I walked to the window and looked out. The shape was gone. The desert floor was clean, bright, empty. Just sand and rock and scrub brush, all casting their normal, honest shadows in the low morning sun. I looked down at my feet. My shadow was back. It was there, stretched out behind me on the floor, dark and solid and mine. I moved my arm. It moved. I stepped left. It followed. I laughed. It came out broken and high and a little wild, but I laughed. And the sound hit the silent desert and came back to me, and I didn't care that nothing answered. I packed my bags. I walked outside. The air was already warming, but it felt clean. I stood on the platform and looked at the flat, empty desert, and I could see the dust trail. The truck. Coming from the north. Right on time. I walked down the stairs, stood on the ground, felt the dirt under my boots. Felt real. Felt solid. Felt like myself again. The truck pulled up. Danny stepped out, same grin as 11 days ago.
Still sane, Vega?
I opened my mouth to say something smart, something tough, something that would make it sound like the last 11 days had been boring. But Danny's grin disappeared. His face went pale under his sunburn. He was looking at me, but not at my face. Behind me. Over my shoulder, Lucia, he said. His voice was different, tight. Who's that behind you? I turned around. There was nobody behind me. Nothing. Just the empty desert and the lookout tower and the sky. There's no one there, Danny. Lucia. He wasn't joking. His eyes were wide, and he'd taken a step back toward the truck. Look down. I looked down. 2 shadows. Mine. My normal, familiar shadow stretching out in front of me in the morning light. And next to it, slightly to the right, slightly longer, another shadow. Same shape, same outline, but wrong somehow. The angle was off. The proportions were just a little different. Like someone had traced my shadow from memory and gotten almost everything right, but not quite. I stared at it. Danny stared at it. The second shadow moved when I moved, stopped when I stopped, but it was half a second behind. Like an echo. Like something still learning to keep up. Get in the truck, Danny said quietly. I got in the truck. I didn't look down again. I couldn't. This is the part I can't tell you myself. What follows comes from ranger logs, colleague interviews, a wildlife camera, and a journal found months later on a desk in a decommissioned lookout tower. I know what I know. But after I drove south, I stopped being the one telling this story. Someone else, something else, finished it for me. I went back to my regular post. I told no one what happened. Danny didn't bring it up either. I think he told himself he imagined it. People are good at that. For a few days, things were almost normal. I did my work, filed my reports, talked to colleagues, ate in the break room, watched TV in the bunkhouse. I even called my mother. She said I sounded tired. Come home, Lucida, I told her soon. But something had changed. People didn't say it directly, but I caught the looks. One of the other rangers told me I seemed dimmer somehow. She said it like a joke, but her eyes weren't laughing. Another said the lights in whatever room I was in felt slightly weaker, like a bulb was always on its way out. Then it started spreading. 3 weeks after I came back, a ranger named Phil mentioned that his shadow had done something strange while he was locking up the equipment shed. It went the wrong way, he said, laughing nervously. Like it turned left when I turned right. Just for a second. 2 days later, another ranger said the same thing, then a third. All 3 of them worked in the same building as me. All 3 sat in the same break room. All 3 had stood next to me in the sun. I understood then, not everything, but enough. The thing in the desert, it hadn't attacked me. It hadn't hurt me. It had done something worse. It had finished what it came to do. 11 days, that's how long it needed. Not to take my shadow, to become it. And now it went wherever I went. And wherever I went, it touched other shadows. And they started to change. I resigned without notice on a Tuesday. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't explain. I packed 1 bag, got in my truck, and drove south. I drove back to Big Bend. Back to the desert. I thought maybe the desert would take it home. Maybe if I stood on those flats again, it would peel off me like a bandage and slide back into the sand where it belonged. Or maybe I just knew I couldn't carry it into any more rooms full of people, any more cities, any more places where shadows gather and overlap and nobody watches them. I parked at a trailhead, left my keys on the seat, and I walked into the desert. They found the truck a week later. Keys on the seat, just like I left them. A wildlife camera near the trailhead had captured a single image that night. A figure, walking into the desert, alone, casting 2 shadows, in opposite directions, under moonlight that should have cast none. They decommissioned the lookout for good after that. The official reason was structural damage. Months later, a maintenance crew went up to clear out the equipment. On the desk, under a water jug, they found my journal. The entries matched my handwriting until the last page. The last entry was written in a hand that was close to mine but not mine. Neater, slower, more careful. Like something that had watched me write for 11 days and had finally learned how. It said, "She carried me out." There are so many shadows here in the city. So many places to walk where people don't. And in the margin of every ranger log filed from that station for the rest of that summer, written in small patient letters that nobody at the station recognized, 2 words, over and over, still here. The Chihuahuan Desert covers over 175,000 square miles. Parts of Big Bend National Park still require solo ranger rotations lasting up to 14 days. The deep desert light is so pure and harsh that shadows don't bend at the edges. They cut, clean and sharp, like something drew a line between where you are and where you aren't. The people who lived on this land long before it was a national park had a name for the thing that lives in that line. They didn't talk about it often, and they never, ever had a word for getting rid of it. Rangers who work the backcountry will tell you the same thing. After enough days alone, you start watching your own shadow for company. They just never ask the obvious question. What if it's watching you back?